For 75 years, the People's Republic of China has vowed to bring Taiwan under its control. We have our own Taiwan Relations Act. We have the One China policy. However, in recent years, that pressure, not just, by the way, with regard to Taiwanese, but other people, including American citizens, has intensified and globalized, with Beijing not only targeting Taiwan across the strait, it is projecting intimidation across borders by the Communist Party and the PLA of China. This would trigger punishing, comprehensive sanctions, Chinese economy, and particularly leaders of the Chinese Communist Party, punishing economic, trade, financial, energy. We all want deterrence in the Taiwan Strait, and I think the threat of these massive sanctions might be critical in terms of deterring cross-strait invasion of Taiwan by the PLA. Well, thank you for being here. Our first panel, I am honored to welcome Ms. Fan Yun, a member of the legislature of Taiwan. She will be zooming in with us, I believe, for the Democratic Progressive Party, who joins us virtually from Taiwan.
I would also like to thank the U.S. Congress and administration for your long-standing bipartisan support for Taiwan. Last fall, our national baseball team won the World Baseball Softball Confederation's Premier 12 Championship. But our players were not allowed to wear jerseys bearing our country's name, nor could they proclaim our country's name in public. After hitting a divisive 3-run home run, our team's captain pointed to the blank space on his jersey where Taiwan should be, celebrating the name that cannot be named. This is the reality we live with, constantly being silenced by the PRC. However, enduring such political warfare has also built up our capacity to resist. As the title of this hearing suggests, in addition to growing military threats and economic coercion, the PRC's political warfare against Taiwan has also escalated. Their tactics include manipulation of international laws, united front work activities, espionage, infiltration, and disinformation campaigns. In terms of lawfare, the PRC has twisted the UN Resolution 2758 for political propaganda in the international arena. They not only aim to suppress Taiwan's participation in various international organizations, but also seeks to legitimize the use of force to annex Taiwan. In addition, the Taiwan has intensified its united front and infiltration efforts within Taiwan. According to our National Security Bureau, the number of spy activity indictments in 2024 was 4 times higher than in 2021, rising from 16 to 64. Targets include the military, the parliament, both the ruling party and the opposition, and civic groups. The PRC has even recruited gangsters to build an armed support network all over Taiwan. The PRC has also established united front organizations in Taiwan to invite religious groups, village chiefs, and college students on heavily subsidized trips to China. For college students, there are special programs attracting young Taiwanese to study, work, or start businesses in China. These activities aim to integrate them into China's economy and eventually come to view China's politics and culture in a positive light. After last year's elections, the 2 major opposition parties formed a majority voting bloc in Taiwan's legislative yuan. After their electoral victory, the leading opposition party, KMT's caucus leader, led 17 of its lawmakers, nearly 1/3 of the entire caucus, to visit China and meet Chinese officials. Shortly thereafter, the KMT, along with the TPP, rushed to put through a series of unconstitutional bills, prevented the national security legal amendments from proceeding to a first reading, and froze or slashed the national defense budget without proper justification. Many Taiwanese believe these actions show how pro-China forces are exploiting Taiwan's democratic mechanisms to undermine both its sovereignty and democracy. In terms of disinformation, our National Security Bureau reported that messages with China's influence increased from 1.3 million in 2023 to 2.2 million in 2024, being spread through newspapers and TV stations, as well as social media platforms such as TikTok. According to a think tank GTI, some media outlets Some media outlets have received direct instructions from the CCP's Taiwan Affairs Office regarding news coverage and editorial commentary. The PRC also funds Taiwanese influencers to produce content in China that align with its political agenda. What's the goal of the PRC's political warfare? Firstly, it seeks to distort the world's understanding of Taiwan, specifically by framing cross-strait conflicts as a domestic issue to isolate Taiwan. Secondly, the PRC works to erode Taiwanese people's confidence in the United States. A recent poll found that TikTok users in Taiwan are more likely to view China favorably and more likely to believe that a pro-USA government might provoke war. This is a clear sign that the disinformation is influencing TikTok users, most of whom are young people. Thirdly, by spreading false narratives, the PRC aims to make Taiwanese either lose confidence in their government or disengage from politics. Potentially, these actions can ultimately lead people to lose the motivation and willpower to defend our democracy. As to transnational repression, recently, the PRC released an investigation report claiming that Taiwan's military conducted cyber attack against China. They publicized the names of 20 Taiwanese military officers and threatened them with arrest warrants and judicial punishment. Last month, the PRC launched a first-ever large-scale disinformation to attack a DPP legislator, Puma Shen, who was advocating for tightened national security legislation. These transnational attacks against members of the military and the government, including the planned car coalition targeting then VP-elect Shao in Czechia, are tactics the PRC is using to intimidate Taiwanese, the cost they would have to bear if they dare to resist China. How is Taiwan countering these threats? It takes cooperation between the government and civil society. In addition to raising the national defense budget to a historical high, President Lai adopted a whole-of-society defense resilience strategy aimed at strengthening the civil defense capacity. To counter the United Front, he has proposed further national security reforms to enhance our resilience against China's United Front and infiltration tactics. To tackle disinformation, all government agencies are asked to rapidly respond to misleading information. More importantly, many NGOs have created independent fact-checking websites as well as tools that can be embedded in apps. For the cognitive warfare aiming to affect the young generation, the Ministry of Education is developing teaching materials about understanding China. It aims to teach students how to critically assess Chinese propaganda. In a highly polarized politics, the effort of the ruling government alone is insufficient. Luckily, Taiwan has a robust civil society with a strong will to defend democracy. I had the honor of serving as the chief commander of the Wild Lily student movement in 1990, calling for the democratic election of our parliament. Decades later, as a professor in 2014, I was even prouder to be part of the Sunflower movement, witnessing the younger generations successfully opposing deeper economic integration with China. Through struggles like this, our society has built a strong democratic tradition. Even now, as I am speaking, Taiwan is in the middle of an unprecedented mass recall campaign launched by civic volunteer groups. The vote will take place this coming Saturday. 31 of the KMT's 36 elected district legislators are facing bottom-up recall because many Taiwanese believe these lawmakers have forgotten that the KMT used to be an anti-communist party. As Taiwanese, we know that our freedom did not fall from the sky. Generations of Taiwanese have fought and made sacrifices for our own democracy. We are working very hard to prevent a war from happening. However, Taiwan alone will not be enough to deter China's aggression. As you must all be aware, Taiwan's security is not only critical to the stability of the region, but also key to the global economy. Standing with Taiwan, we can work together to protect our shared value, prosperity, and the rules-based global order. Thank you all for your time and support.
Well, thank you, MP Fun, and I want to thank you for testifying today and also for your courage over many years and decades on these important issues, and we very much appreciate you. And we are joined by 3 distinguished panelists to discuss the intricacies of the PRC's multifaceted campaign against Taiwan and others, and I would like everybody to please take their position, and I'm going to introduce each of our witnesses today, starting with Rear Admiral Mike Studeman. I'd like to welcome retired Rear Admiral Mike Studeman, a former commander of the Office of Naval Intelligence. Throughout his career, Admiral Studeman has led intelligence operations every level, from the tactical to the strategic, and supported combat operations, including Desert Storm, the Balkans, in Afghanistan. Admiral Studeman's joint assignments as a flag officer included Director of Intelligence for the nation's largest combatant command, Indo-PACOM, where I first got to meet and know Admiral Studeman when our military billets overlapped, and as the Director of Intelligence for U.S. Southern Command in Miami. He has held major command posts as a captain, including the Joint Intelligence Operations Center for U.S. Cyber Command, and Admiral Studeman now currently serves as a National Security Fellow at MITRE and is on the Board of Advisors of the National Bureau of Asian Research. Admiral, thank you for your decades of service to our country.
I spent 35 years in the military and at least half a dozen tours dealing with Indo-Pacific matters in one way or another. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to discuss PRC political warfare against Taiwan. I'd like to open by describing my direct engagements with Taiwan over recent years. I visited Taiwan 3 times as the Director of Intelligence for Indo-PACOM. I happened to be the first 2-star active duty flag or general officer to visit Taiwan in over 40 years when I flew to Taipei to brief President Tsai in 2021. I was directed by the NSC and the OSD, Office of Secretary of Defense, to outline PRC military courses of action up to an invasion. During this briefing, and another one I delivered a year later in 2022 to share lessons from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, I highlighted the most serious threats to Taiwan's survival. While we mainly discussed high-intensity combat operations under modern conditions, one of the major points I made was that Taiwan wouldn't survive if it only focused on an outside-in strategy of hardening its outer shell with military forces. Taiwan would need to apply equal efforts at strengthening its gooey center to ward off threats from the inside. Decades of PRC political warfare machinations had created vulnerabilities inside Taiwan that the PRC wouldn't hesitate to exploit during an attempted takeover. Taiwan would need to get real about these pre-existing omnidirectional threats. This conversation naturally led to discussions that went beyond merely stopping the PRC offshore or on the beaches to improving defense in-depth capabilities, urban operations, strengthening internal security, counterintelligence, fostering better civil-military coordination, and the merits of mobilizing society to engage in people's warlike actions that allow an inferior to defeat a superior. After my presentation, President Tsai declared she had waited 4 years for such a briefing, and she came over to me in a time of COVID, and we knocked elbows together. To Taiwan's credit, they had already passed an Anti-Infiltration Act in 2020 and taken other measures to protect themselves over time. But in the 3 years since those engagements that I had out in Taiwan, and as the PRC became more aggressive in all domains, Taipei has done even more to strengthen its porcupine defenses, including by fielding more asymmetric capabilities, and has undertaken a range of judicious measures to better protect itself internally. In my written testimony, I provided a specific list of actions Taiwan has taken or is in the process of taking to deal with persistent PRC attempts to co-opt, subvert, and manipulate Taiwan citizens. You should know that Beijing's political warfare efforts are relentless, pervasive, and all-encompassing. The aim of CCP political warfare is to isolate Taiwan internationally, weaken domestic support for either de jure or de facto independence, and soften the Taiwanese people's resistance to annexation. Beijing uses all instruments of national power to convince the Taiwan people that unification is inevitable and resistance is futile. It may be useful to think about Beijing's political warfare efforts as a highly orchestrated, interconnected, and multi-tiered set of activities that include white, gray, and black elements. White or overt means involve CCP diplomatic actions, official media propaganda, military operations, and trade relations that are all used as levers of influence. Gray or semi-overt means involve such actions as Chinese Coast Guard, maritime militia, and ghost fleet, encroachments in the maritime space, the use of foreign media to propagate and reinforce disinformation, funding and manipulation of political parties, discounted junkets for politicians, academics, journalists, and students to visit China, where they're then influenced by United Front Work Department reps, and co-option of social media influencers and celebrities, and so much more. Black or covert means involve agents in place for the purpose of espionage, influence, and/or sabotage, recruitment of former Taiwan military, police, Coast Guard personnel, establishment of sleeper cells and weapons caches, offensive cyber operations, and activation of criminal groups such as the Triads in Taiwan for various purposes ranging from harassment to potential assassinations. I've offered a number of ideas about how the U.S. might assist Taiwan in dealing with these clear and present dangers. A few of them include helping to strategically reduce Taiwan's international isolation, further encouraging Taiwan to spend more of its GDP on defense while giving due regard to their political and industrial realities, developing deeper Taiwan and U.S. cooperation on cybersecurity, and helping Taiwan upgrade its classified clearance system and adopt more advanced insider threat technologies. Thank you for the chance to testify, and I look forward to your Q&A.
Thank you, Admiral, and thanks again for your decades of service. You are truly one of the experts in the world, certainly in the United States, on these issues, and it's great to have you here. Turning to another expert, Mr. Mattis, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Sullivan and Co-Chairman Smith and all of the other members of the Commission. This is a little bit of an odd hearing for CECC, but I think it's important to recognize that all of the tools that are applied against Taiwan are also applied in other areas that CECC cares a great deal about. These are fungible political tools that can be levered for these things. As awareness of the Central Committee's United Front Work Department has grown, never mind that there's an entire policy system associated with it, I don't think the awareness has grown of the approach. It is a sort of a theory of politics or a practice of politics that the party pursues. And it is fundamentally one that is defined by warfare and struggle, because it is about how do you identify your friends, how do you mobilize them, and how do you use them to convert neutrals and to strike or isolate your enemies. This is language that has been clear and consistent. Xi Jinping has used it, and it has been used all the way back to the founding of the party in the 1920s. As Admiral Studeman said, this is a global perpetual campaign against Taiwan, against the idea of the Republic of China, that this somehow has gone away, much less any sort of political future of Taiwan that is separate from the PRC and what the party chooses to define as China. I think it's worth noting that for decades the party's intentions have been clear, in part because there are many people that would like to deny that the CCP, using its armed wing, the People's Liberation Army, would choose to attack Taiwan. There are all sorts of reasons that this would be a terrible outcome. It could have trillions of dollars of consequences for the global economy. But we need to appreciate that this is where the party's intentions are and where they have said this. It's easy to dismiss this as propaganda, but the statements that have been made are not simply speeches. They are directed to party cadre, to guide them, to mobilize them, to tell them what is expected of their work, that this is one of the objectives that they are going after. The second is that if you look at the way the CCP people the CCP considers to be Chinese people, right? Whether you're talking about Uyghurs in East Turkestan, whether you're talking about Tibetans or Mongolians, but also many, many other Chinese. Right? You look at the statistics, something like 40 to 80 million people have died under the CCP, depending on how you count the Great Leap Forward and the famine that ensued. Things like the suppression campaign of Sichuan, supposedly after liberation, that killed hundreds of thousands of people, led by the so-called reformer Deng Xiaoping. And this is the kind of fate that is actually awaiting Taiwanese if it is. The third is that the CCP has been willing to take far higher costs to do certain things than external observers have ever been willing to give credit for. If you ask most Americans who are aware of the 1979 war with Vietnam, they will say Vietnam won, based only on the casualties that Beijing took. But if you look at the political objectives, did Vietnam learn the lessons that Beijing wanted? Did the Soviet Union learn the lessons that Beijing wanted? Did you look at the way in which the United States sort of responded positively and rewarded Deng Xiaoping for that war? They achieved everything politically, and last time I checked, war was about achieving some sort of political objective. As Admiral Studeman mentioned, the intelligence cyber attacks inside Taiwan have been really quite remarkable, and there are a few new things that are worth highlighting, even though this has been constant. The first is that some sources have been forced to record videos of professing their loyalty to the PRC, so to be held back for a time of war, be used for propaganda purposes. Of here are other military officers or other soldiers saying, "Oh, well, actually, I profess my loyalty to the PRC." Another is the targeting of the Military Police Command, which has sort of increasingly stepped up because this is the presidential protection detail. It is about learning about where the leader is at all times and demonstrating real-time awareness of this. Because one of the lessons they learned off of the Ukraine war is that you don't want smart political leadership to survive. Internationally, we've seen a number of different things, from the campaign to get countries to move recognition from the ROC to the PRC. And this is something where when you look at that have done this, like the Solomon Islands, others, you can see a concerted effort to build influence with key politicians, mostly through the United Front system or through companies like Huawei investing in a telecom, restructure in one province or another, to essentially build a relationship and make the flip happen by cultivating those individual leaders. More than 600 Taiwanese in the last decade have been extradited to the PRC from other countries. You know, if there's something more fundamental about sovereignty than your ability to take care of your citizens, it's hard to imagine what that would be. There have been perpetual efforts, especially since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, to use the UN Resolution 2758 to say that the UN has already settled what has taken place. It's already settled Taiwan's status. It's already settled that Taiwan is a part of China. And all it simply said is that the ROC cannot represent China in the UN, right? And that the PRC was the root of that. In international organizations, the CECC was the one that was the organization responsible for highlighting that the World Bank was supporting the vocational training programs that were disguised for the mass incarceration and labor transfer programs in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Well, the same tools that allowed them to do that, control over budget and HR in the World Bank, are also what allowed them to block Taiwanese from working at the World Bank, except on anything other than a short-term contract. So all of this is really about trying to undermine Taiwan as a polity, as a society, as a separate, distinct political entity. And pushing back against this is in fact going to be a political act. This is something that Taiwan's politicians are going to have to decide about what is okay in terms of business, in terms of education, in terms of culture, in terms of entertainment, in terms of travel. What is acceptable or not? These are difficult decisions. In our own discussion about research security and how we cooperate with PRC companies. And it's going to require presidents and parliamentarians in Taiwan to mobilize their population to talk about these issues in ways about what is the political choice, what do we want to do? And we really shouldn't punish Taiwan's politicians for having to carry on a conversation in a democracy, because the country that is actually destabilizing the status quo, which is of an ROC and a PRC that actually exist, is Beijing. It is the Chinese Communist Party. And we should punish those that are actually responsible.
Thank you, Mr. Mattis. Now, before we turn to Dr. Wong, I know Senator Kim has to leave here in a minute. Do you want to ask the witnesses any questions before you head up? Okay, and then I'd like Chairman Smith to be able to say a few words if you'd like to, sir, and welcome. And then we'll turn to Dr. Wong for her testimony, and then we'll open it up for all members for questions. So, Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your tremendous experience that you bring to bear as the new chairman of this commission. Nobody knows Taiwan like you do, and you have been a true leader when it comes to Taiwan, both when you wore the uniform and now. So I can't thank you enough for that. That enhances this commission in a very, very real way. I've been on the commission for decades. I've chaired it, co-chaired it, and so glad to work with you. It's a privilege, and I want to thank you for that. I do have a full opening statement. I was late because I was giving a major address on human rights. I had a lot of questions from people, so I couldn't get out of there in time, so I apologize for my lateness. So I won't go through my opening statement, and maybe at the end I will, but I thank our witnesses. This commission has made, over the years, just ask Xi Jinping's Chinese Communist Party what they think of it. I'm barred, like so many other people, from going to China, in large part because of the work that we do here. I see Pastor Fu behind you, who's Bob Fu, just a tremendous leader on religious freedom, both, especially on mainland China. So it's just, we need to do more. We need the human rights issues to be even more front and center than they are. I would note for the record, and I say that not as a partisan thing, but I always believe that we lost, and I actually wrote op-eds for it and joined Nancy Pelosi. We were joined on this one years ago when Bill Clinton delinked human rights and trade on May 26, 1994. That's when we lost China. They took the measure of us and said the only thing they care about in Washington, and Clinton, having been an outspoken linkage guy to human rights and trade, totally delinked it on a Friday afternoon when everybody was leaving here. I did a press conference, a speaker conference, and we all said, how could you? The people of China have been hurt. The people of Taiwan, I think, by extension, get further at risk because of the Chinese Communist Party being so emboldened, enabled, and then from a military point of view, the dual-use items that were conveyed to them beginning then have made them militarily. And that is, unfortunately, very, very tragic, and I say it again, all preventable. Others have enabled over the years, but that was the pivotal time when we lost China. And I'm not the only one who thought it. We had the votes to sustain linking MFN with trade. And what happened? The vote, because it was all taken away with that one fell swoop of an executive order that delinked human rights and trade. So we've been doing catch-up ball ever since. And I find for victims of name the abuse, like forced organ harvesting, and all the other abuses that are committed daily by Xi Jinping, and of course the existential threat that he poses to Taiwan. And again, to have people who know it, live it, understand it, we need to do more. And again, we have a chairman who understands Taiwan like nobody else in the U.S. House or Senate. So we are very blessed to have that. Again, I'll put my full statement in the record, but I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you very much. And thanks for your leadership and passion. And we're going to get a lot done here. So, Dr. Wong, you're up, and welcome.
Chairman Senator Sullivan and Congressman Smith, honorable members of the Commission, thank you for the invitation to testify today. In my remarks, I'd like to highlight a few main points. First, transnational repression against the Taiwanese diaspora and supporters of Taiwan is the tip of the spear of broader PRC political influence efforts in the United States and other free societies. Such activities are driven by, in large part, by the United Front Work Department, a CCP organ that seeks to co-opt allies and silence enemies domestically and abroad. And so in the context of Taiwan, that means suppressing supporters of Taiwanese democracy and pushing the CCP sovereignty claims and narratives over Taiwan status. So transnational repression and political influence activities consist of multi-pronged community and political mobilization to not only engage in direct surveillance and harassment of Taiwan supporters on U.S. soil, but also to rally portions of the overseas Chinese and Chinese American communities to engage in public and highly visible displays of support for Beijing's position on Taiwan. Right, so we have official united organizations like the Council of Promotion of the Peaceful Reunification of China, which has multiple branches in the United States and globally with the explicit goal of asserting Beijing's sovereignty claims over Taiwan. But these influence activities also involve the co-optation and mobilization of a broader array of overseas Chinese hometown associations and other grassroots organizations. And so if you look at Chinese writings on the United Front, they explicitly call for these societal organizations and overseas Chinese community leaders and elites to play a role in promoting Beijing's interests, including over Taiwan. And so these groups are often rallied, often in tandem with the Chinese consulate for public demonstrations and protests. For example, around former Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen's transit through New York and Los Angeles in late March and early April 2023. Right, and so through open source research, examining online videos and photos of these events, right, I was able to identify close to 30 groups involved in on-the-ground demonstrations. And there was one protest leader that claimed that over 100 of these community associations were represented in these demonstrations, right? And so they're gathered outside Taiwan's hotel or outside in LA, outside the Reagan Presidential Library, where President Tsai met then Speaker McCarthy, right, waving Chinese and American flags, shouting slogans such as Taiwan's a traitor, and holding banners proclaiming Taiwan as part of China. These protests also illuminate another trend that we're seeing, which is that the Chinese government also seeks to co-opt Western voices and form tactical alignments with domestic interest groups, such as far-left anti-imperialist movements in the United States. So in these protests in New York and Los Angeles, we see a number of these anti-war, anti-imperialist groups like Code Pink, Answer, Coalition, Pivot to Peace, protesting alongside Chinese groups, overseas Chinese associations, and United Front-linked groups as well, right? And so in their messaging, they're framing U.S. support for Taiwan as part of U.S. imperialism and warmongering, and reframing China's position as one of preserving peace and the status quo. And so by extension, right, this implicitly recognizes Beijing's sovereignty claims over Taiwan, right? And so the Chinese government, may not be directly controlling these groups, but they see this as a way to further legitimize its narratives and reframe the Taiwan issue. And perhaps even more worryingly, we're seeing United Front actors reshaping the political landscape in the United States in favor of pro-Beijing actors, while suppressing supporters of Taiwan, right, with the goal of reshaping the public discussions and political discourse around the Taiwan issue. So my own research and other reporting has examined how these Chinese Communist Party-linked groups and individuals not only try to get positions as political aides and power brokers in local and state politics, for example, but also are trying to increasingly as a political machine of sorts to try to get pro-Beijing individuals into elected office, right? And so Chinese government is playing identity politics, exploiting contentious social and political issues to, such as anti-Asian hate and public safety, right, with the goal of gaining currency among overseas Chinese populations and legitimizing Beijing-linked individuals and organizations as grassroots leaders that are defending the community's interests and rights. And so this mobilization, right, then in turn serves as a foundation for Beijing's political machine to field preferred candidates and rally votes to get them elected, right? And this has direct implications for the Taiwanese Taiwan issue as well as other issues that the Beijing government, Chinese government cares about. So as one example, right, in New York City, during the election, a Republican candidate endorsed by United Front groups won a tight state race against Taiwan-born Democrat incumbent Lee Wen-chu, who had attended a dinner when Taiwanese leader Tsai Ing-wen transited through New York in 2023. Right, and so these political influence tactics, even at the state and municipal levels, can have a very powerful trickle-up effect, right, where you get politicians who may be increasingly aligned with Beijing's interests or beholden to CCP-linked actors, right, and that has the ultimate effect of influencing broader policy discourse on Taiwan, on Xinjiang, on human rights in China, right, in favor of the Chinese government's positions. Now, just conclude with 2 points, which is, again, reiterating that the actors and tactics used in these, right, are just part of a broader pattern of intensifying PRC influence activities, right, not just stamping out Taiwanese quote-unquote separatism, right, but also trying to shape narratives and policies on Hong Kong, on Xinjiang, and even sort of getting involved in U.S. Politics. And the second point I'd like to conclude with is that these CCP political interference operations, right, includes but goes beyond transnational repression, right? So there's definitely coercion, intimidation, surveillance, but there also, alongside that, there are also a lot of broader attempts at co-optation and control of overseas Chinese communities, right, who can have very diverse viewpoints and diverse backgrounds, right? And so they're really trying to change beliefs and behavior, right, and have a broader goal of ultimately shaping U.S. discourse on Taiwan and other issues that the Chinese Communist Party cares about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wong, and thank you for your courage on testifying on a lot of these issues. We have votes and other hearings, so we're going to be kind of moving in and out here, some of the members, but I'll begin with my questioning of all the panelists. We'll have 5-minute rounds of questions. Let me begin just with the most basic question that I think, and I'd like to open it up to all of you, that I think every American should be aware of. You know, there's transnational issues all over the world, of course, but can you describe, and you already did it, Dr. Wong, but in other ways for other witnesses, how is the Chinese Communist Party on all of these issues taking actions in America, right? That's the one that really, really, really boils my blood, right? So, you know, are they trying our elections? By the way, the irony of that is huge. Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, they would never stand for elections. They fear their own people, we know that. But they're coming trying to influence American elections? That is just unacceptable. And I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, no American would want the Chinese Communist Party trying to influence our elections when these never have the guts to stand up for their own elections. So that's number one. But also in terms of intimidation. So how are they intimidating either Taiwanese citizens who are in the United States, Chinese citizens who are in the United States, or more importantly, Americans? How is the Chinese Communist Party trying to intimidate American citizens? You know, we read about these crazy police stations in New York City and stuff. We need to know about this, because this is completely unacceptable. And I guarantee you, heck, even Code Pink might be against this, Dr. Wong, right? If the Chinese Communist Party is in our country trying to influence our wonderful democracy. So can I get a sense from all of you of exactly examples of how they're trying to do that, either through influencing our elections or intimidating American citizens of Taiwanese or Chinese or Hong Kong origin to be quiet, and what should we do about it? So I'm really interested in this question, and I think every single American, we need to know more about it. If the Chinese Communist Party is in America doing all these things, boy, oh boy, that is unacceptable, and I guarantee you every single American would agree with that. So you want to start out? Have a sense of this?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you bringing this up. Probably the least discussed topic within the United States of America today that requires the most discussion and action. So I think it's fair to say that there's been a silent invasion of the United States. There was a book that was written
Silent Invasion.
Silent Invasion. There's a book written about that when Australia faced the same kind of things, and they addressed it, and they've to better protect themselves. We need to do so as well. I have a list of things that maybe would provoke some thought here about examples of Chinese influence. First of all, Hollywood remains beholden to CCP censors, and they're actively painting a benevolent PRC. And so we don't have the entertainment industry that's available to describe these things to the American people in a way that they might over time come to understand, particularly if they distrust government. But government itself has failed, I think, to be able to describe. So can you just
on the, sorry, I want to make sure you get through all your list, but just on that, Hollywood is beholden to Chinese, pretty dramatic statement, right? Hollywood's very powerful in America, around the world. Do they go to the masters in Beijing and say, please, Mr. Xi Jinping, is it okay to do a movie or not a movie? Like, how bad is that?
So there is less dependency today on the Chinese market because many movies can't actually go there and profit the way they used to. But for many years, movie makers would, in fact, if they wanted to sell their movie in China, they would allow their scripts to be reviewed by the CCP censors. And over time, they knew what the left and right limits were, and then they could self-censure, which is actually a metric of the success of political warfare when you self-censure because you know what you're supposed to say and not to say.
Yeah, that's shameful.
Right. Other issues, universities have been hooked on Chinese tuition dollars. Academic freedom has been threatened. There are examples of this. Scientific and laboratory cooperation continues to transfer the seeds of innovation to the Chinese. There's been recruitment of ethnic Chinese from inside the U.S. government and businesses, influence attempts at the local and state level designed to create dependencies that then the Chinese can leverage, including pressure on the federal system. Multimedia influence operations with Chinese-owned or influenced media capabilities in our country and globally. Purchase of property near U.S. sensitive facilities and bases, which we're getting after, of course, thanks to Congress's help. We have operations inside U.S. critical infrastructure that CISA has talked about, but this is at the national all the way to the municipal level in the United States. Cyber espionage has been well covered, but that continues to be $200 to $600 billion. That's trillions of dollars of U.S. IP that has gone over to fuel China's modernization and their rise. Also buying stakes in U.S. companies to get tech secrets. All of these are part of sort of standard CCP exploitation malign actions. There's been discussion about many of these things. We've taken certain actions to strengthen our capabilities, but I think we have a long way to go.
Right, thank you. Mr. Mattis?
So I think you can find worldwide some examples of the CCP trying to influence elections. But real power is not caring what the election outcome is because you've cultivated the people around a candidate or a candidate themselves. And when you look at the targeting in Taiwan, in Australia, in the United States, it is the same. It is the same piece. You can see examples, what you see in Canada, what you see in the United States, what is Taiwan, Australia, elsewhere. And it is the effort to cultivate the individual candidates and the people around them because today's council member, today's mayor is tomorrow's governor, tomorrow's senator, have you. So you can cultivate people going through the system and shape the way they understand China, the PRC, Taiwan. And if you think about how you interact with your constituents, right, you don't call every single constituent and try to get them to a place. You go to the Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club. You go to places where people gather. And that's the core of what Audrey was describing with the United Front system, of cultivating these organizations so that when you say, I've got 500,000 Chinese Americans as constituents, maybe I need to go find a way to speak to them. These groups are fundamentally stealing their voice as citizens and now representing the party with pretending that they're representing American citizens to you. To here's what we want, even though that we is actually the party, not those supposed groups. And that's one of the ways that those groups are in fact dangerous, that it's the party taking people's voice and providing. Another way is that the cultivation of officials. So if you think about the charges that were put against Linda Sun, a former New York State government official, right, she was a liaison to the Asian American community. So if you were Taiwanese American or if you were Uyghur American and you were going through her, you were seeing things blocked. You were not getting a response from the state government. And sort of pro-PRC interests that were being represented through the state would continue to funnel through and reach the attention of state officials. So you could see someone who was blocking these issues out, not representing all of the Americans that she ostensibly represented or that New York State represents, but only Linda Sun and the people that she and the PRC government approved of. So you can continue looking down all these examples, but what we're talking about is really threats to economic opportunity and creation of economic opportunity. So the payoff to Linda Sun was that her husband got a lot of contracts to the tune of several $1 million, allegedly, from the PRC. And so it's much harder to go after those kinds of relationships because they're a problem. And this is why it is a conversation that has to be discussed publicly. What's acceptable, what's not, because we're not going to arrest our way out of this.
Dr. Wong, you have any?